Hello everyone. As I was looking through some of the samples for the projects, for the first project that you will be presenting next week, it was brought to my attention that most of you are still working with the number 3 key on the keyboard for smoothing your models. In reality, that is just an approximation of what smoothing the model would be. In other words, you're not truly smoothing the model. And it became more evident when some of you were actually modeling based on that smooth reference. In other words, you were pressing the 3 key and you were modeling as you were working on that mode. The problem with that approach is that your model, your base model, is actually going to be completely different than what you expect it to be. The geometry will be completely different, and this will cause problems when you actually go to export your final model. So for an example of what to do, I'm going to show you how to actually go about smoothing your model before you actually export, before you actually do the final renders. This is the body of the red writer that we were using in class, the one that we used to texture both sides of the model with the mapping when I showed you guys that in class. And as you can see, it's a very low resolution version of that model. Now if I select this side and I press the 3 key on the keyboard, the number 3 key, you'll notice that it gives me that smooth look that we saw in class. Let me select the other side and do the same thing. And you'll notice that I have both sides of the red writer very, very smooth. Fine detail, looks really good. In reality, if I select it, you'll notice that I still have the exact same amount of geometry. So I really haven't smoothed out anything. This is just a representation, a faux representation of that smoothing within the viewport. I can go ahead and render this, and the renderer will respect that smoothing, but it's truly not adding the extra geometry that I expected to have, number one. Number two, if I were to send this to another program, say Mudbox or something like that, my geometry would default back to this geometry. So it's not truly what I'm expecting to do, what I should do before I actually go to my final render. Now, the thing is, the problem that I encountered in class was that if you, for example, select this side, and I'm going to press the 3 key, and let's say I want to increase the crease in this area here for where the wheel is going to go, the casing for the wheel, the what would be the fender, I want to increase that crease in here. I want to make that a little bit deeper. So to do that, what I would do in the workflow would be to right click and then go to vertex, or to go to an edge and then select the top edge right here. Now with that edge selected, I'm going to go ahead and pull it up, and I see that I'm getting the nice crease that I want. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my vertex mode, and I'm going to select these 2 vertices here to even create more of that curvature and create a more pronounced crease, as you can see where the fender would go. While this is nice and nicely set up in this view, in the fall view, let me go ahead and take out the fake smoothing, and you'll see how my geometry is looking. You'll notice that this geometry is extremely distorted. It doesn't look anything like what my final render, where I want my final render to look like. So that is problematic, because when you go and try to update this, your geometry, you really don't have a true point of reference for that geometry. So what we want to do, let me undo all this. And what I'm going to do now is I am going to apply smoothing by using a modifier. So I'll select my geometry, and in order to make this slightly smoother, what I'm going to use is the the mesh drop down, and I'm going to go into smooth. Now smoothing is the tool that will add extra geometry to my model. In fact, it will add 4 times as many per number 1 of divisions that you add in here. So if by having a number 1 in this divisions level, each one of my selected polygons will turn into 4 polygons. You need to be careful with that, because it will increase the amount of polygons very fast, which can make your machine crash, or it'll make it impossible for you to render anything because you have so much overhead geometry. So I'm going to go ahead and leave that at 1, and I'm going to click smooth. you'll notice that I get extra geometry and my model starts getting smoother. Now with this, I have extra geometry in here to create that crease, and without, I'm still in the number 1 mode. So as you can see, this side here is basically the exact same as this side, only with the extra geometry that was given to me by the smoothing. Now I can go ahead and enter into this area, select vertices, or select an edge, for example, and then select that edge and increase that size or bring that up slightly to create that crease. Perhaps even select this one here and bring it in ever so slightly to increase the crease even more. Okay, and with that result, that basically is a lot closer to what my original intention was going to be for the final model of this piece. Now let me press the 3 key with that selected, and you'll notice that I get a much smoother rendering with the actual crease. But when I go back to my base model, it's not as distorted as the other one was. So I hope this helps you to identify where you should be smoothing this as you progress. You should not do your full smoothing until you get to the end of your model to avoid having the overhead geometry. But when you feel that you get to a point where you actually need the extra geometry, especially when you're adding details, say to eyelids, eyebrows, creases on a car, where 2 things fold in a model, that's where you will look at this as an option to start adding the extra geometry.